In this video, I'm going to talk about how we can take those primitive, basic, pre-made shapes on Gravit and then combine them together in different ways to get what is called a compound shape. So you might have heard the word compound already in chemistry. It just means that it's a combination of two or more parts. So to start us off, what I first want to remind us of is that whenever we are working with multiple objects in our workspace, these objects are always going to be layered compared to one another. So at the moment, I created a rectangle first, and then on top of that, I created an ellipse. So if I go ahead and combine them, sorry, if I move my ellipse over to where my rectangle is, notice that the ellipse is on top, so it's going to be covering the rectangle. I can see this not only from moving the shapes one on top of the other, but I can tell from the layers panel. So if I wanted the ellipse to be underneath the rectangle, I would grab the layer containing the ellipse and I would drag it underneath like that. So that's just something I wanted to remind you guys of. One other thing that I would like to point out before I show you how to combine objects together is that when we're moving objects in relation to one another, a cool thing that Gravit does, and also Illustrator does this as well, is that it's able to give us guides so that we can center or align the objects compared to one another. So notice as I'm moving the rectangle, I have a number, which is the distance between the two objects. As they get closer, it should go down to 0. And then I have that blue line. So this is telling me that they're aligned on the middle, here they're aligned on top, and here they're aligned on the bottom. You can also select two shapes and then use these buttons on the right hand side panel to align them in different ways. So we'll have another look at that later. So what I want to do now is combine these two together. So I'm going to be using this icon. If I hover over it, it says create compound shape. So to create a compound shape, first of all, my two objects have to be touching. They can't be separate. There can't be any space between them. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to move this ellipse on top of my rectangle, or actually my rectangle is on top of the ellipse. I'm going to select both of my shapes. I'm going to go to the drop-down menu and I'm going to select Union. So Union is going to merge the area of the two elements. So once I press Union, they combine together. They're now one shape. And in my layers panel, you can see that it transformed into compound shape. Even though this is a compound shape, I can always go ahead and subselect the parts that make it up, right? So I can, let's say that I've made the compound shape, but I actually want the rectangle to be a little bit smaller. So I can go ahead and make changes after merging them together, so I don't have to restart everything from scratch. And I can do the same for the ellipse. So whenever you create a compound shape, you can change the whole thing when you're in Pointer, or when you select here on the layers panel, or you can go into subselect and then change the single components like that. Okay? I'm going to delete this and we're going to try to create another compound shape. So I'm going to put my ellipse. My ellipse is on top of my rectangle. Notice here in the layers, ellipse is on top. I'm going to select both. And then I'm going to do subtract. So subtraction is going to subtract the area of the lower object. So my lower object is the rectangle, which means that the rectangle is the one that's going to be cut out. And the shape that is being cut out is the circle, which is on top. Once again, I can go to the layers panel, I can select my circle, and then if I want to change how it looks, I can always go ahead and make those changes after I've made the compound shape. So that's subtract. Last two ones, again, I'm going to create a rectangle and then an ellipse. I'm going to have them intersect like that. Select both, intersect. So it's going to create a shape with the overlapping area of the selected elements. So if you guys know what a Venn diagram is, that's kind of what an intersect does. So any part that is intersecting, this was the part that was intersecting between the rectangle and the ellipse. So that's the only part that remains of my compound shape. And then last, and then ellipse, they're intersecting again. Last is going to be difference. So create a shape with the parts of the selected elements that don't overlap. So I'm going to click that. Let's see if it did anything. Yeah. So it deleted the part in the middle, which effectively was the intersect part from earlier, right? So it deleted that middle part, and what we're left with was the parts that were not overlapping. So it's kind of like the opposite of intersect. And that's it for today.